Hello comrades, and welcome back to another video. So, a couple of things have been made aware to me. So, first and foremost, one is that I pretty much constantly swear. Now, not that this is necessarily an issue in and of itself, I don't imagine there are many children watching my YouTube videos about politics. I doubt there are many 10-year-olds sat there going, oh, I really want to learn about the means of production. But I do appreciate if you want to watch this as an adult potentially, and you have children in the room, it's nice to not have constant swearing, so I will probably not do that anymore unless, a specific situation calls for it. The secondary point is that when I react to one of these terrible videos live, I have a tendency to ramble or pause for 10 seconds or so to say my point. So I have watched this video and I've got some notes just to make it a bit snappier, but if I ramble a bit, well, it's 1 in the morning, forgive me. Anyway, let's get into this another PragerU video because these are actually quite funny. And yeah, let's get into this absolute waffle.
Trust in the media is at an all-time low, and for good reason. We in the business of journalism have exempted ourselves from the normal rules that used to govern us, and so the most egregious kinds of reporting errors are becoming more common. Formerly well-respected news organizations and experienced national reporters are making the sorts of mistakes that wouldn't be tolerated in journalism school.
I mean, first and foremost, this is me being really picky, but are they I've watched a video and she doesn't give tons of examples of this, so I kind of feel like this is really condescending, but let's continue. I have more important points to make.
These mistakes are corrected at all, it's with seemingly little regret. And the corrections never get anywhere near as much attention as the original salacious but incorrect narrative. How do we get here? I discuss that in detail in my book, The Smear.
Buy my book, people! I do like to point out this is pretty much nothing more than a plug to sell her book, and it will not go into any nuance the actual reasons as to why media have biases, to who they have biases to, and to how to spot them, as many other books will that I can recommend if anyone's interested.
For 3 factors. First, firewalls that once strictly separated news from opinion have been replaced by hopelessly blurred lines.
Okay, this again is a little bit potentially picky, but PragerU, or Fake University, is funded by Dan Howard Wilkes and Faris Cullen Wilkes, also known as the Wilkes brothers, who are American petroleum businessmen. Now, could this potentially have an impact on the fact that they, PragerU being they, have made a ton of videos saying climate change isn't real and fossil fuels are actually great? Possibly. Yet they present themselves as an objective form of, well, not necessarily journalism, but education. So the platform you're using yourself is incorrect by your own admission. Anyway, I just kind of find the irony to be quite amusing. Anyway.
Once forbidden practices such as editorializing within straight news reports and the inclusion of opinions as a fact.
Isn't that what you're doing? Isn't that what PragerU is entirely, though? It's just, well, these are my opinions and they're facts because I have this twisted form of logic. That's pretty much just what Prager University is, and if you dislike it and you were a actually principled person, you would have said no to coming on here, wouldn't you?
Are not only tolerated, they're encouraged. The result, it's never been harder for Americans to separate news that's real from news that's not.
I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think the media has always had a bias. Well, it obviously has. Just look at the Cold War posters. but it's very evident to know that now it's slightly more subjective. People pick up on them more. Ever since Trump started calling things he didn't like basically fake news, I think a lot of people became slightly more aware, for better or worse, of the media's, well, blatant lies a lot of the time, towards both right-wingers and often left-wingers. This has been going on in my country with a pretty prominent politician for quite a few years now. And honestly, it's worrying. So yes, I agree, the media are lying at times and are flawed. However, the reasons you give are totally false. Anyway, let's continue.
Example, May 14th, 2016, 10 days after Donald Trump became the Republican presidential nominee, the New York Times published a blockbuster article titled "Crossing the Line: How Donald Trump Behaved with Women in Private." The story's authors, Michael Barbaro and Megan Twohey, interviewed Roanne Lane, an ex-girlfriend of Trump's. Her quotes made Trump sound at best like a jerk and at worst like a predator. The reporters went so far as to provide their own quotes for the story, presenting their personal commentary as if it were established fact, writing,
Now, I've actually read the article, I just read the online version, and in her own words that she says, it does sound very wrong what he potentially did, and there are multiple accounts of potentially off things going on. Now, I don't want to accuse anyone of being anything at this point in time, and I doubt there's very much to it, but it does seem a little bit off to me,
"This is the public treatment of some women by Mr. Trump. Degrading, impersonal, performed." The problem is the reporting wasn't true, according to Trump's supposed victim.
Actually, that's not what she says. She more or less says, I disagree with the interpretation they give. That's not the same as saying they were lying or they were wrong. That's a subjective disagreement. Okay, like the one I'm having often with a Conservative Party member. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm objectively right or he or she's objectively right. It just means our subjective opinions differ. However, what is not subjective is the fact that you're lying.
Once the story was published, she publicly accused the Times of misleading her, writing a hit piece against Trump, and putting a negative connotation on what she said was not a negative experience.
Well, I mean, again, experiences can be thought of subjectively, but like I say, it does seem very off from my perspective, though again, that's just my opinion. And again, she even seems to imply herself that in this specific misrepresented quote that the reporters just took a different perspective, from hers. And whilst she may not have necessarily seen it as negative or derogatory, there is some offness to that situation as a whole. Anyway, I kind of feel off speculating on this because it just feels like I'm way out of my league talking about this, so I'm just gonna move on quickly.
No matter where you stand, this was a huge development in terms of journalism. The main source behind front-page national news discredited the entire premise of the story.
Well, that's largely disingenuous. They discredited the perception and how the words were perceived and how the message was supposed to be taken, or, potentially even the intent, but not the entire premise. Unless she suddenly changed her mind, potentially some vanilla envelopes have been passed to her. But I don't know, that's quite disingenuous to me.
You'd expect something like that to rock the whole news organization and prompt investigations, a retraction, and re-examination examination of policies. Yet I can find no record of any of that.
Well, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe it's almost like the media did what they do. They interviewed somebody, then they took what they said, then they gave their point of view on it, and reported the facts, then gave their point of view, and left it up to the consumer. Now, it must be noted, corporations and newspapers, etc., do have biases, but I'm almost going to assure you they're not out smearing random rich people running for presidency with absolutely no basis. There is no smoke without fire. At the end of the day here, there are certain allegations against the president that do look very bizarre, and at the end of the day, there is definitely basis for it. Not the none like you claim there is.
Times and their reporters never even apologized or printed a correction.
Again, maybe it's because it wasn't incorrect.
Second, though we may personally like or dislike a politician, as journalists we're obligated to treat them the same. Too often that's not the case.
I agree. Just look at my country. Now, whether you dislike or indeed like Mr. Corbyn, often the media resort to personal attacks against him and total falsehoods. If anyone wishes to discuss this with me on Twitter, I'll be more than willing to oblige them. But at the end of the day, it often resorts to name-calling and falsehoods. Now, admittedly, this does happen against a lot of prominent hard writers, like as in people who are on the hard right. It happens to both wings by the typically centrist media. Now, when people say centrist, that doesn't necessarily mean they're unopinionated, it just means they don't like anyone who potentially threatens the status quo to some extent. This isn't all media, there is lots of different types of media. I'm just saying often the media are a little bit biased in their own way, and I do just want to highlight the biases the media in my country have against politicians I like, and there are some activists I strongly dislike but I oppose the media lying about. I can give slightly more specific examples about this in the comments or on Twitter if you want to discuss it with me, but it's just important to get the idea across that the media do lie sometimes, but often it's about slightly more subtle and subverted things. Anyway, let's continue.
For example, in May 2008, then presidential candidate Barack Obama said he had visited 57 states. Since there are only 50 states, everyone knew what he meant. He meant to say that he had visited 47 states. The remark, nothing more than a verbal gaffe, drew little attention, and it didn't deserve more. But when Sarah Palin made a comparable gaffe saying, "We've got to stand with our North Korean allies," she was...
Now, I think it's potentially important to note the fact that there is a bit of a difference between making a remark to the media just offhandedly and going on the campaign trail, to 47 states and then slipping up. There's certainly less to it when you're campaigning, in my opinion at least. Now, what's quite worrying is saying maybe she does mean North Korean, maybe she's a secret North Korean spy. I'm joking, okay. But again, you can see the kind of narrative she's trying to spin, that the media is all in favour of people like Barack and, the supposed liberals, etc. And she's saying it without saying it, but it's rather interesting to see that she's trying to project this as objectively, but she's not. She's working her opinion in there. And just to be clear, that's the whole point. This is my opinion. These videos are my response to my opinion. My theory videos are objective, quantifiable claims that I've drawn from books, etc. But this is my opinion. Now, I will admit that fake university and its shills won't.
Is relentlessly ridiculed and mocked in the media, even though everyone knew she meant to say South Korean allies. Third, too many of us have allowed ourselves to become tools of politicians and spinmeisters, often in order to get something in return. I call this transactional journalism.
As funny as a term that is, it seems potentially something like Donald Trump would coin. But we do have to potentially look at the wider issues here. Why are people incentivized to do these things in the first place? Is it possible politicians maybe have too much power? Is it possible that they will lie, cheat, and backstab to get their way into power? Now, the example she gives here is about Hillary Clinton, and I agree. Hillary Clinton was a snake, certainly, and I certainly did not want her to become president. Not saying I wanted Trump, I mean, I wanted Bernie Sanders to win, and I still want Bernie Sanders to win in his presidential election, but it's important to note I do actually agree that there was certainly some corruption going on in her campaign. However, there was also, potentially, plenty of corruption going on in the Trump campaign. I don't think these claims about Russia come from nowhere, and there is certainly at least some basis to them. I haven't researched it in too much detail, so if I later change my mind on this because of new evidence, do not hold me to account to it, please. However, again, it's a little bit disingenuous to just say, well, look at this one liberal, they're cheating and backstabbing their way into power, or at least trying to. It's not like us, the moral uprighteous right, would ever do that. It's just a little bit disingenuous. I don't know if I'm reading into it too much, but, well, there you go.
Example, emails show in July 2009, the Atlantic reporter Mark Amender was promised a scoop. He'd get an advanced copy of a speech by then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, but only if he followed certain conditions, as privately dictated by Clinton aide Philippe Rines. Rines emailed Amender precise instructions, including describe Clinton's voice as muscular and don't say you were blackmailed, by which Clinton aide Rines obviously meant don't reveal our arrangement.
I haven't actually researched this personally. However, that's her opinion. There could be some other blackmailing going on. Don't look into it too much. I haven't looked into it too much. But it's certainly important to note that this is just one politician that's been exposed to potentially be a little bit corrupt. Even if, and that's potentially a leap in logic as it is, it's her aide. She may have been unaware. That as well, we do have to acknowledge the fact that politicians are, in a lot of cases, corrupt. Quite obviously. And maybe we have to look at the fact that the system is incentivizing these people to act in these ways in the first place, before just saying, well, all journalists are obviously liars.
Got it, replied Amender. His resulting article reads in part, when you think of President Obama's foreign policy, think of Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. That's the message behind a muscular speech that Clinton is set to deliver today. That Amender, then considered a serious journalist, would allegedly violate basic ethics for such a minor story speaks volumes about the state of today's news media.
It really doesn't. For one, it was, by what time it is for me now, 10 years ago. For you, it would have been 8 years ago, so it's not really up to date. Secondary point is, what, one dude being a bit dodgy proves that the entire media is false. That's like saying because a right-wing guy carried out a shooting, every right-wing, member of the right wing must be crazies. It's really disingenuous and unfair to just lump people into categories like that. And it is quite dishonest of you, I feel, to say these things. So maybe you do have a point. Maybe journalists like you are lying and forgetting these things. But of course, it's not the mass media necessarily doing it, though I do think they do to some extent. It's you, and it's your fake university. But please, continue with your last bit.
For the record, Amender defended himself by saying that he found Clinton's speech to be muscular, so the adjective was appropriate. I think most Americans would like to believe their news is factual, well-researched, and untainted by a reporter's opinion. To put it another way, they want their news straight up. But too often now, that's not what they're getting, and they know it. I'm frequently asked, can the news be fixed? The answer is yes. But the first step to fixing a problem is admitting that we have one. Until we do that, nothing can change. I'm Cheryl Atkins.
Now, she certainly seems to not realise the issues and the motivations behind the media lying, which is the underlying problem here, and it's often the problem with observing problems, but not observing the symptoms. Anyway, I'll just round out on this note. Be a bit sceptical of everything you see on the BBC, Sky, whatever. Okay, because they do have biases. They certainly do have some form, and I don't want to sound too much like Farage, but they do have an agenda to some extent. However, that does not mean they're going to magically make up stories out of nothing. The thing I will say to you is, don't just ignore everything, just have a bit of skepticism and go, this sounds a bit off, let's research it a bit more heavily. Just be aware of the small lies that build up in the media, in advertising, marketing, etc, 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 and just so long you're a bit aware of it and you're prepared to sift through it, you'll be much less affected by it and you'll be much better off for it. But anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is clocking in at around 20 plus minutes, so please leave a like, please leave a comment, subscribe, and just tell me if you like this kind of video a bit more. I've done a bit of research and I'm talking a bit calmer and I'm not making fun as much. Anyway, see you later, comrades.